Hi, Joe.
Hey, Sarah.
So, you and I have both taken some time to pause on a specific episode of The Evolving Leader that's given us some pretty deep food for thought. So, that's
Mhm.
episode 16 of season 2, featuring Dr. Beau Lotto. I'd love to ask you, Joe, what was your biggest takeaway?
So I loved this episode. There were so many takeaways, but I think the biggest for me was that we never see reality as it is. We see our own interpretation of reality from our own perceptions. So that's just layered with our own assumptions and biases. And one thing that Dr. Beau Lotto says a lot in his work is that we make the meaning. And that is based on what makes sense to us at that time. So with our own context, with our experiences, with our emotions and how we're feeling. And we're always trying to reduce our uncertainty by telling ourselves a story that makes sense. And for me, that's been super helpful in so many aspects of my life once I realised that. So in my decision making, in my problem solving, in my relationships with people. So for example, when I'm in conflict with somebody, or even just speaking to somebody where we've got a difference of opinion, knowing this information now has enabled me to just take a little pause, ask some questions, share my perspective, but also hold in my mind that the other person thinks completely differently, and that's okay. We're both not seeing reality in that moment. We're both seeing what makes sense for us. And I'm getting better at it. Sometimes I don't always catch myself in the moment, but I'm definitely getting quicker now of raising my awareness. And that just gives me an opportunity, even if it's retrospectively, to remind myself of that and bring it back to a conversation so we can move forward in the future.
I think I really relate to that. And that was the same takeaway for me. It gives me a different perspective on different opinions and how honestly everyone's just doing their best, really trying to avoid what brings fear to them. And I think we'll talk about that a bit later. But I was also really interested in the fact that your brain evolved to take what is uncertain and make it certain, and that every behavior is an attempt to decrease uncertainty. And this idea really stopped me in my tracks. It really made me start to wonder when in my life what decisions that I've made, where I've been able to combat fear and really push past it just because I was feeling a little bit more certain. And maybe this certainty was due to external factors. So it also made me think about how maybe the key to navigating uncertainty with a little bit more ease and maybe a little less fear is reframing what we don't know into opportunities. And I think back to moments where I did step into unknown situations. I did do what little amount of due diligence that I could by recognizing and validating assumptions that I held to make sure that there was a level amount of safety. And I think it always goes back to the fact that we as humans are just trying our best to limit fear.
Yeah, I really identify with that as well. And that brings me actually to the other thing that I thought was a really big takeaway and a great learning for me, which was when I'm in stress, which, I mean, let's face it, stress really derives from fear and that need for more certainty. My brain can start to make connections and stories that might not even be there, just to give me some sense of certainty and to reduce that fear. And when I see this play out for me, I can become quite rigid in my views and in my thinking and sort of less open to other people and not so open in my decision making. And that's because I've created this false sense of certainty and security in my own interpretation of what's going on. And it's ultimately just to reduce that fear. And again, I found that accepting that that's what my brain is trying to do for me, that it's trying to be helpful in those moments, and that's what's working out. I can again give myself a momentary pause to challenge those thoughts and perceptions and be more open to possibilities. But one thing I have found is that takes so much conscious practice, and it really isn't easy to challenge myself like constantly. It does feel like that. But my learning is to consciously give myself space and to ground and admit to myself that I am reacting from this place to try and gain some sort of sense of control and certainty, but that what I'm perceiving is not accurate. So the question that I find really useful to ask, and it's one that we're encouraged to ask a lot here at Outside, is how might I be wrong? And that just gives me that moment to recognise that actually what I'm not seeing here is objective reality, and that there might be a different way of thinking.
You're so right. And I think you really nailed it on how this is constantly about continuous self-reflection, awareness, and practice. For many of us, it doesn't just come naturally. You really need to put in the time to develop your self-awareness. And I think Dr. Lotto offered so many interesting tidbits and nuggets in this episode, but I'm thinking maybe we stop here. And I would really encourage everyone to head over to season 2, episode 16 of the Evolving Leader podcast. Catch the whole conversation with Dr. Lotto there. And there's a link in the show notes.